Hello, friends. Happy Sunday. So good to be with you. So good to be with you. Just to be in your presence and just feel that positive energy. I know I looked forward to it. And we were just having a conversation about how there are sometimes we get in here and it's exactly what we need. Exactly what we need. So welcome. And we'll start with some words of wisdom from Tim.
Thanks, Cecilia. Let me echo Cecilia's comments. It's always good to see everybody. And that's right. It's like when you walk in and see all your friends, it's like, okay, safe. I'm good to go. Words of wisdom this week. And we have veteran teachers on here, so you will understand this. The more we know, the more we know we don't know. Now, when you initially hear that, it's kind of feels negative. It's like, well, then why should I learn anymore if I'm going to get dumber the more I'm learning? But when you link that with the one part of life that we have control of, and I think it's the only part we have control of, and that's our attitude, how we're going to approach things. In the Chinese script, the sign for chaos and the sign for opportunity are the same sign. So, how do we define when something happens? Do we define it as chaos or do we define it as opportunity? And the one part we have control over is the filter we look through, or again, our attitudes. So when you look at the more you know, the more you know you don't know, instead of giving up and going, why learn more? It's the opportunity to continue to widen the scope to learn more. So, in an essence, every time we hit a challenge of any kind, it's the chance to grow and to learn more, to widen the lens to meet the next challenge, to learn to grow more, to widen the lens. And you can widen it that way, or you can widen it the other way and take it down to everything's against me. Now, you're not a member of SLAM if you're thinking the second way. That's just not so. But I don't know about you, I need reinforcement all the time. So that constant plug-in, whether it's Sunday night or being around people who are uplifting, reminds us that the real journey in life is to continue to learn more. And that's all there is to do. It's all yours, Cece.
That's all there is to do, right? Make it sound so simple. We just have to keep learning, right? Well, tonight I'm thrilled for us to get to learn as we shift our focus this month to teacher feedback. And I think each month this semester we've focused on one of the SLAM tenets, just to give you a bit of what we build ourselves upon as an organization. And so we've talked about making connections, and Sunday night we get to make connections within our own Slamily, but then what does that look like when we run in, when we go into our rehearsals, right? How do we build those kinds of relationships with our students? How do we build those relationships with our colleagues, with our volunteer workforce, with the administration, with all of the folks on our campus? And we, spent last month talking about character. We've talked about motivation. And this tenet, I feel like, has, and they all have a bit of practicality about them, but I think more than any of our other tenets, this is one where we really have something to sink our teeth into, because it is what we do, right? Teaching is not telling. They haven't learned it because we've said it. We've got to go through this constant process. And I really do believe that music educators are the epitome of formative feedback. We do it better than most of our academic colleagues because we have to. We can't wait until the quiz or the test to give students feedback. And we're doing it all day, every moment of every day. And so how is it through the Servant Leadership Association, how do we approach that? How are we delivering it? I think we talk a lot about the what and the how. And so this next few sessions that we have together, we want to be able to give you some tools for delivering that really constructive and meaningful feedback to the students that help them grow, but in a way that we are nurturing who they are as humans, and that we're giving them honest and sincere feedback, with kindness. I think sometimes we forget that. I know I didn't receive feedback as a band kid with kindness. I was afraid to make a mistake. That's how I didn't make mistakes, not because anyone taught me what mistakes not to make. I just don't mess up. So we do want to get past that, and I think that we are growing in that way. But I asked Maurice Burgess, who is an incredible middle school choral director in South Carolina, president of SCMEA choral division, teacher of the year, all the things. I asked him if he would share with us some thoughts about teaching and feedback in our book, Craft and Culture, Becoming a Music Teacher Leader. Maurice is really the author of our chapters on that particular topic. And if you go to Craft and Culture this summer in Charleston, you'll get to learn from him firsthand. But Maurice, if you could share some thoughts with us.
Yeah, first of all, it's always intimidating because I'm just a person trying to get by every day and give students my best, just like everybody else. But I think we can all talk about the things like front loading and using a rubric to kind of guide students into having the language and understanding of what it is that we do. But I think what Tim mentioned is such a crucial part of it. I actually try to train my students to not think of making mistakes even in terms of growth, but that we're always looking at positive performance feedback. And that's what we're looking at it as an opportunity for growth and not necessarily an error per se, but how can we focus more on getting the message across that's within the music. And and I think one of the things that we can truly think about with our feedback is that yes, there's the musical part of it, but that we also have to have it be personal and that we've got to be intentional culturally within the music. And I know I'm a choral director and I deal with words, but I'm also a trumpet player. And so I've had to think about it from that perspective as well, that with the students, I need to take them on the same journey that I'm going on to understand that music so that they truly understand what the perspective is that they're pursuing because it's going to give them motivation for wanting to improve what it is that the music is trying to say. And I think it's they need our help in as simple a way as possible. I understand that as a middle school teacher, but relating what it is in the song to themselves and their lens. And students aren't going to naturally be able to do that. And so I think it's very important that when we're delivering that musical information, that we don't just deliver it as just the articulation or just the balance or just the intonation, but why are those things important? What is the message that we're trying to say? And how can we do things differently that might deliver the message in a different way? And I think that if we're very intentional about it, just like we are with delivering feedback in what we're hearing musically, then I think we can really, that's when we get those really purposeful, inspiring performances from our students.
That's great, Maurice. Thank you so much. Tim, or no, David, sorry. I was like, I was just get closer to the screen to see David posted one of the graphics from our book about effective feedback. David, did you want to talk about that?
Okay.
Now, here we go. Yeah, I was just going to comment that one of the things that dealing with young teachers and teachers in their pre-service practice at Georgia State, it's a lot. A lot of what we see is telling folks what's happening, but not giving them any solution of information. So I think one of the things that we can do right off the bat tomorrow is to remember to be specific, right? And not necessarily indicating what's wrong, but be specific in, I stole this from Frank Troika probably 25 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. And what I love about Frank, if you've ever seen him do his rifle, how to teach somebody to do with this rifle spin trick, he said, he uses the phrase, this is what I hear, this is what I'd like to hear, or this is what I see, this is what I'd like to see. And so many times when I'm dealing with student leaders or staff or young teachers, we say, oh, we're rushing right here. Well, that's not really specific. It is to us, but that doesn't mean it is to the 12-year-old in front of us, right? And so if we can be specific, we can say, in measure 23, we're compressing the first 3 notes and getting to the 3rd note too soon. Can we spread those notes out a little bit? Let's be specific in our feedback. A lot of times we generalize based on the error. And so we're actually in kind of a generalized error detection mode as opposed to giving effective feedback.
Can I piggyback off of that a little bit, David?
Please, yeah.
Yeah, so what I also want to say too is so many times we're training our students because they're going to be practicing on their own. And the same way that we have to go about being specific, being timely with it, we have to kind of train them to train their own brains to be that way. And as we know, there's a lot of clutter. I know in middle school, there's a lot of clutter from life that is in our brain. And we kind of have to train them to be able to bypass that clutter and focus on being, again, specific. Because we all know that the worst voice that we hear is the voice in our head. But if we can focus on being specific with it and being action oriented with it and train them that that's exactly how their thought process has to also be, then I think we can save them a lot of frustration, and then we can also save them a lot of time and help them build a lot of confidence in what they're doing, because it becomes whatever the action is that they're trying to accomplish versus them feeling like they're hitting a roadblock personally and themselves.
Yeah, that's awesome, Maurice. I would say the other second one that just is really hot in my brain is that I often liken feedback to communication. Like I would ask, how many of you give me a thumbs up if you prefer to receive information via a text? Anybody? Thumbs down. Okay. What about via email? What about via phone call? How about face-to-face? Yeah. See, and so here's what it's important to remember. How many of you, give me a thumbs up or thumbs down, how many of you communicate more frequently and the way you prefer to receive that information when you think you're communicating to others? Are we all guilty? Yeah, right. But we just talked about multiple ways in which we can communicate. And the same thing is with teacher feedback. It's really easy when we're pressed for time and we only have 42 minutes because we got the instrument cases out, we got everybody to reseat, and we're trying to change a new setup and where they're singing and whatever they're doing. And then we just kind of go into the same mode of giving the same type of feedback the same way day in, day out. And so the other element is to challenge yourself to give feedback in at least 3 different ways today. And then make sure at least tomorrow you give them 3 ways, but at least something else is different, a new way tomorrow, because that keeps us all fresh. It keeps us fresh, but it absolutely keeps them fresh, right? So that's just those are the 2, CC, that I feel like I have found most frequently as of late, is that we tend to give feedback in the way we perceive or prefer it, just like we do communication, and we tend to be generalized instead of specific.
And I want to jump in because now I'm on fire. The idea of being specific. I think that as a younger teacher, because I had a very limited vocabulary and how I could deliver the news, that something needed to be better, and I wasn't as smart as Frank Troika to say this is what I hear and this is what I want to hear. I would, in lieu of hurting anyone's feelings, I would just make a comment to the ensemble. And it took a while for me to realize the kids either thought, well, she's not talking to me, and then nothing got fixed at all, or everyone was self-conscious that I was talking to them and they took it personally. So in an effort, I thought to not call students out, because that was one of my shortcomings. I didn't know how to use my words to be able to deliver that information in a specific way that had intentionality and could be delivered with kindness. Because God forbid I should say, Tim, if you do that wrong one more time, Tim still doesn't know what he did wrong. But now Tim doesn't want to do anything because he's so afraid that he's going to do whatever it was that he did wrong, which now is going to be anytime he touches the drum, he's afraid that he's going to do something wrong. So let me just not try. So I just giving that specific feedback is just so important. It is so important.
Why is it,
Oh, go ahead, David.
I was gonna say, why is it so easy to be that specific with the drummers? I don't know. Right? Or the basses, right? I mean, there's just some sections where it's really pretty easy to be specific with in that context, right?
You have to use small words with those folks. Love them, but you just have to use like the small words. Don't
Hey,
do that, please.
Ben, I'm so glad you're here. Maurice, I was going to turn it over to you and then I cut you off.
Okay,
Please, sir.
yes. I have to say it is absolutely an honor to introduce Robyn Hilger, who is our executive director of ACDA. One of the cool things I discovered about you is that you didn't really get into administration intentionally, that you started off doing band and strings, and then people sought you out to be in that position. One of the things that I have truly admired is the focus on looking at those marginalized populations, and even being able to look at a student population and see that they need to be empowered and be able to use their music in a positive light to change their lives, but also the world around them and the community that is around them. One of the things that I also want to say is that ACDA actually, if I'm not mistaken, reached out to you, the search committee, to ask you why you had not applied for the position. And from my understanding, that it was kind of you loved them and they loved you, and it just seemed like a great union. And one of the things I truly admire about the direction that you've taken us in is that I think ACDA has a shared vision with you, but that also too, you have us truly examine our purpose and why we exist, whether our purposes should be our purpose, whether we are living up to that purpose. And I saw that on full display at the national conference. I actually got to see it from the perspective of a performer and the perspective of an attendee. And if I had to say, describe it in 2 words, I would say that it was inspiringly intentional. And so I know that this conversation for tonight is going to be inspiring, intentional, and purposeful. And we can't thank you enough for all that you do and all that you are going to share with us tonight.
Oh, Maurice, that's so kind. Thank you so much. Maurice is correct. I am an accidental executive. It's still a little bit of a mystery to me that I'm not in front of a band or an orchestra every day. And yet, I think sometimes you have to follow your calling, even if you don't understand what it is. Sometimes other people know that better than you do. And I've just been so fortunate to be able to pick up these bits and pieces of knowledge all along the way, that I just try to use my powers for good and not for evil. Do you guys know what I mean when I say just try to use my powers for good and not for evil, try to help someone every day, um, and just try to be someone that people can count on. And I think that that's really important from a servant leadership standpoint. When we think about these things, I've kind of got some windy notes here, but being a person that people can count on, I think, is critical to being a leader. Whenever someone calls you for help and you are, whether you're leading your band, whether you're leading a school, whether you're leading an organization that's an international organization, people need to know who they're going to get on the phone, right? So, Yes, we all have good days and bad days. Everyone has good days and bad days, but I think it's particularly important when you are in a service capacity that you try very hard to regulate that so that if you're having a bad day, it doesn't become everyone else's bad day. Or if somebody has called you with a very difficult issue, you don't let that slow down progress on other issues, right? To just be very steady. And I think that I hope I'm doing that in ACDA every day. Maurice, thank you for talking about the purposes. That has been something that's been, I think, very important. It's provided a lot of clarity to the organization. People have a lot of feelings about a large organization, about ACDA, the programs that we do, how we do them, who's performing, how we get there. People have lots of feelings about those things. But at the end of the day, if you say, well, I understand we feel this way, but the bylaws say X, the mission says Y, and the purposes say Z. So are we in alignment? Are we out of alignment? If we find that we're out of alignment, how do we come closer into alignment with these things? I think maybe one of the most important questions in ACDA recently has been, are we the modern organization that our teachers need us to be today, tomorrow, and well into the future? That does not mean throw the baby out with the bathwater, but there are things about school, about university, about choral practice, about the selection of repertoire, about composers, about conducting that have changed. It and you guys are all leaders, so you know this. Sometimes when you talk about changing something, um, the first thing that people think is what we were doing before was bad, right? The assumption is that was bad and now we have to do something different, rather than I always try to express those things as we took those actions at that time because it served a purpose. It served a purpose. Are those actions serve us we need them to today? Just very clear, good, bad, whatever it is. But sometimes things do have to change for you to meet the needs of people in the field. I'm so glad, Cecilia, that we started with feedback, particularly feedback to students. I would offer a couple things. One thing is that one of the reasons we give feedback to students is to build their self-awareness and craftsmanship. These are two very important skills. So self-awareness, knowing how my behavior, how I act, what I do impacts others, and craftsmanship as being defined as is whatever I'm working on. You have a craftsmanship skill if you know that whatever you are doing is not ready to leave your desk or see the light of day yet. Craftsmanship is what keeps it on your desk before you send it out into the world. It's when you know that it isn't prepared enough, that it is not ready yet. And feedback helps students prepare in those two ways. Self-awareness, how am I, what is it that I'm doing is impacting everyone else, and able to judge my own craftsmanship. So how do we get to a point where you don't need to tell me, or you don't need me to tell you the rhythm was incorrect or any of those things? But we're building these essential skills for students even outside of music. This is, when everybody's talking about these workforce ready skills, self-awareness and craftsmanship are on everybody's list. And we can do it better than anyone. The other thing about feedback, which I think is important, and I grew up, I think what I would say in a very traditional band setting. The director told us what they wanted to hear, and we did it. That, uh, and I had a great band director. I'll tell you about him in a minute. But what I would say, kind of through my learning and being around great mentors, is um, we're actually creating something together. It's not what I want, it's what we want here, which again is connected back to that self-awareness and the craftsmanship. And so feedback is not only a one-way street from teacher to student, but it also should be students to each other, students to the teacher, um, students to themselves, us to ourselves, so that we are really creating something together. When we get to the end, we can all say, we did this, not I did it the way my teacher told me. I feel like if my students said that, I did it the way you wanted me to do it, I would be like, "Oh, I feel like I should apologize to like the kids that were in my class, like at the very beginning. Sometimes I still see them here in Oklahoma City, and I just feel like I should apologize to them. Do you guys ever have that sense, like with your like your earliest kids? You're like, I'm so sorry. I'm just so sorry. I think it's important to remember that feedback is positive and constructive. So it's both. And sometimes in our field, we are overly constructive. That's what I would say. We don't praise enough. We don't praise enough. Now, this is not false praise. I do not believe in that. Do not tell people it is good or that it is meeting the standard or that it works when it is not. Because when you do that, one of two things happen. They either think you're an idiot and don't know what you're talking about, or they think you think they're too dumb to know the difference. Because everyone knows if it's good or not, right? When we think good or not, everyone knows. So you can't false praise. But I think sometimes, and maybe I'm just speaking, maybe no one else has this problem except me, but I'm kind of hyper focused on the next thing that needs to be done, as opposed to sometimes appreciating the progress um, in the moment. Like, can you just stand there at the end of the concert for just a second, take a deep breath, look around you, look at the parents smiling, look at the children smiling, look at the full parking lot, look at grandma who brought flowers, look, families going out to eat, doing those things. For goodness sakes, hug your spouse or partner, tell them thank you, go have a good dinner before you're like, all right, next with the contest, kind of thing. I think sometimes we miss out on that positivity. Um, so I like to ask students, sometimes we ask them things like, what went well, or how did, what parts did you like? What parts did you perform well? I think sometimes starting with something like, what made you the happiest? What made you most proud? What brought you a lot of joy? What would you want to see happen again? If we could make this happen again, what would you want to see happen again? Because when we say what went well, they're gonna be like us because they are our mini me's usually. They pick up our habits, and so I think when you start with some of the feelings part of it, we really get to the heart of why we are there in the ensemble, and that also builds perseverance. Perseverance, particularly for the times when things are rough. And then maybe finally is for us as teachers to have foresight, which is predicting where things are going to go well and where they're going to be a challenge and setting students up for success in that. And giving people just multiple opportunities to nail it. So is everybody on here familiar with playing tests? Did you have to do the playing test, the infamous playing test? I know you did. Oh, it took so much criticism when I started my playing test practice. Now Jaden's not gonna be old enough to know about cassette tape recorders. But we had cassette tape recorders that I would check out to the students for their playing tests. And they could record their playing test as many times as they wanted. There was a period of time, but at the end of the day, they just turn in the tape. And I had colleagues who would say, I can't believe you're doing that. You don't really know what they learn. Here's the worst thing. Everyone's going to get 100. How are you going to know what chair they should be in? Right? And I was like, oh no. You mean that every kid is going to go home and practice their part until it's absolutely correct? What is what is the problem here? There are many, many, many ways to assess students and to give them feedback. So I just offer that to that piece of the conversation. But predicting where something is going to be difficult. Now, certainly don't tell them that that's the hard part. But structuring it so that you have that they're getting feedback and the skills to be able to mount that challenge, I think is really important. So Maurice called us out a little bit earlier, which is ACDA's secret is that they have a director who has never taught choir. Not a day, not one ensemble. Please do not call me to conduct your honor choir. That would be a mistake. Interestingly enough, I'm going to tell you that it's been a huge advantage in the organization. First of all, my job is not inherently an artistic job, right? I'm on the administrative side. Now, it's helpful that I am a musician. I know what it means to sing on a fabulous stage, like Maurice was saying at the Meyerson. All the choirs sang on the stage at the Meyerson. The honor choirs sang there. We are always going to tune the pianos. We are always going to do these things. So that is helpful because we're not going to balance the budget on that end. But I think it also keeps me, first of all, it keeps me humble in my role because I am dependent upon our members for their expertise. I need to call people to say, tell me what this looks like in your classroom. Tell me how you're dealing with this. Tell me what this means to you. Tell me. And of course, I have members who have 50 plus years of membership in ACDA and then members who are, college students. So, in everything in the middle. So, that dependency is actually, I think, a strength here because I don't sit at my desk and think that I know exactly what to do for the organization, because I don't. And we are a membership organization. The other thing is because I don't have a choral background, I don't feel like anything is off limits to me from a discussion standpoint. So you heard Maurice say this a little bit earlier. Um, I I do care if I hurt someone's feelings, but I'm not afraid to ask the question in the room because it is likely that I might not know who so and so is and what they've accomplished and how many awards they have. I'm probably just going to ask the question if it needs to be asked in the room. And but you do have to be extraordinarily respectful of the work that has been done and the shoulders on who everybody stands, quite frankly, in the work. But my board and the members educating me, I think, has done so much to solidify our relationship together because I am teaching them the things they need to know about the financial standing of the organization. Everybody is feeling great about their budgets. They're feeling really good about the new programming and things that we've accomplished. And they also know that I'm going to call. I'm going to call for help and insight and to source their expertise. And I think it's really important as a servant leader, as Tim said earlier, to know when you don't know and to be really forward about it, very forward about it. In fact, I teach finance for nonprofit organizations at Oklahoma City University. I have for six semesters now, and I wrote the curriculum for the degree program. I don't have an MBA. I do not have an MBA. I do not have any of that. What happened to me is I was a volunteer on our Systema project. They had an executive. I was on the project as a volunteer in my work at the Foundation for Oklahoma City Public Schools. And there was a falling out between the executive and the board. Many of you know my colleague, Michael Reiber. Mike and I have done 10,000 projects together. He's one of my favorite thought partners. Mike and I were on that project together. He was the artistic director. I was essentially the operations director. And we just begged the board. We said, please do not hire anyone else right now. Let us start the project. We can hold down the fort. Obviously, there's some work the board needs to do. If you haven't been able to keep your leader for the first year, just let us get started. And 6 months later, the board chair called and said, hey, we found our executive. And I was like, oh, you did? That's so great. And she was like, it's you, you moron. And I was like, that's actually how I became an executive director. I'm not joking. That's literally how it happened. And I was like, Kathy, I'm a programs officer. I only know how to spend the money. I don't know how to make it. What are you talking about? And she said, you've been being the executive, Robyn. You've been doing this. You've been doing this. I said, okay. I said, but here are the things that I know right now that I don't know. And I was really fortunate that the dean of the School of Business, Steve Agee, you can look up Steve's name. He was in the oil business. He just retired from OCU, but Steve here is known as the board member who is just going to nail you on your financial reporting from a nonprofit standpoint. And Steve is on the board. And I said, okay, I'm going to call. Here's all the things I don't know. I said, okay, I'm going to call Steve. And I called him and I went over to his office and he said, oh, we're so glad you're going to be the executive. And I said, Steve, I don't know how to do the financial reports. I don't know what I'm looking at. I've never had to do that. And he said, hang on, come with me. So we go out of his office, we go to his assistant, and her name was Teresa. He said, Teresa, put an hour on my calendar with Robyn every week in perpetuity. Get it on the calendar every week in perpetuity. And he looked at me and he said, when we set the appointment, you show up every week. And I was like, yes, 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 sir, I will. And I essentially had private tutoring from one of the best oil people here in Oklahoma City who every hour for weeks on end sat with me talking about every line of a financial report, but maybe even more than that, he talked to me about the things that people miss. He talked to me about where things go sideways, not only about how to do it correctly, but where the mistakes happen. And I also think that that's a really important lesson for teachers is when we're doing teacher education and we're talking to teachers, we teach them a lot about how to have it go right. But I'm not convinced that we spend enough time talking about where this thing goes 3 ways to Thursday. And, and you need to know that it's going to happen that way. And so I'm extraordinarily grateful for Steve. Here is a person whose schedule is way too busy. Our organization is like this big, like $200,000 maybe. He's already a dean of a school of business and he's carving out an hour for me on his schedule. And that is something that has stuck with me about what it means when you're building the future, right? When sometimes it takes an hour a week, but how fortunate. And my high school band director was the same. I was here in Oklahoma City. I was in a very large program. My parents relocated to essentially Branson, Missouri, and my dad moved months before we moved. And I Robyn in the homecoming parade. And I said, oh, you did? And he said, all 7 of them, like 7 people, all 7 of them. And I thought my dad was pulling my leg. Okay, because I was in a band where we had homogeneous classes, plus large ensemble, plus private lessons on site, plus, plus, plus. No, you guys, I get to Missouri and there are 7 people in this band. I am not even joking. And I about lost my mind. But my band director took me under his wing because I told him, I want to be a music teacher. This is what I want to do. I want to teach band. And he said, well, you know what, Robyn? Playing clarinet in band is maybe not going to help you very much, but you are going to need to take on a secondary instrument, right? So that's how I learned to play saxophone. It's how I learned to play the French horn. It's how I learned to play percussion. It's how I learned to play where else could you do that? The other thing that happened, because I'm in a super small school district, is Mr. May tells the high school principal, hey, put Robyn on independent study for English, and she's going to walk across the street to the junior high and teach the 6th grade clarinets. And that's exactly what I did. I did not go to class, and I went across the street and I taught the 6th grade clarinets. But that never would have happened if I hadn't had a teacher who tucked me under their wing and took a special interest in me. And I think when we think about our mentors, we think about servant leadership, we think about the opportunities. I just have so many people who showed me the way. Tim and I were talking about John Clinton a little bit earlier. Many of you know John. I was John's wife's, Becky's assistant for a decade in a summer camp. And she is the first person I saw as an administrator, and as an administrator with students, more like a principal. And so just being in that environment and watching how they lead, how they make difficult decisions, and quite frankly, the feedback that they gave to me. I remember that, a really good mentor is going to tell you when you need to do something different too, and that's why you need them, but they deliver that message kindly. So maybe that's kind of the last thing, and I'll see if there's any questions. But when we think about feedback, one of the kind of the last thing here that I would say is when you have to deliver bad news, be direct and be swift. Nobody has time for soft and avoidant approach. Some of the best mentoring I had about this was to come at it from a point of empathy and also of a commitment to growth. You are committed to their success. So the belief, at least my underlying belief, anytime I have to address something with a student, I had a meeting with one of my college students this morning. We're on the same page. We're working towards the same goal. Um, there's potential here and you have the ability to do it. Something is in the way. So we need to kind of check through the list. Do you have the resources? Do you know where they are? Did you do what you needed to do? What is happening here? Be specific. So we heard that today. Please do X instead of Y, right? But also to ask for their ideas about how to solve the problem. So that's what I said to the student today. They're having a struggle keeping up. And I said, let me give you a couple of suggestions. And then I said, I would like for you to think overnight about it and then send me some suggestions based in your schedule, what is going to work. And my commitment to you is if we can agree, we'll kind of put this other schedule aside because we'll agree on how we can get the work done and how, right? Because the schedule is just arbitrary. It's just something that's decided. And I would much rather that she learn and be able to commit herself to the work. In fact, she's already emailed me this evening. It didn't even take a day. But don't demand people come up with those answers in a meeting. Sometimes it's too much. It feels like it's too much pressure. And then I think leading the conversation with compassion. So one of the best lines anyone ever gave me goes like this. What we need to discuss today is very difficult. It is hard for me to say to you, and it is very likely going to be difficult for you to hear. However, our relationship is too important to let this stand between us, and that's why I need to talk to you today. Right? Really powerful. Really powerful. And anytime I've had to start something with that, the the person already knows if you're calling them in for something, they already know that something is off, right? And they're kind of like waiting for the hammer to like fall on them. And so if you just put the words to it, what everyone is feeling in the room, and you just say it, it kind of decompresses everything. That has been a very successful. I've used it with young students. I've used it with employees. It's one of the best things. So I'll say it again. What we need to discuss today is very difficult for me to address to you, and it is very likely hard for you to hear. But the reason this is important is, right? Um, I think sometimes we think what do they call it? The sandwich, the feedback sandwich, start with something good. Just listen, I'm not a fan of the feedback sandwich. People are waiting for the sandwich. They don't hear what you say first. They're waiting for the meat. So just get it out into the room. So Cecilia, thank you so much for the invitation to share tonight and to be with everyone. And maybe I need to be on Slam on
Yeah.
Sunday nights.
I'm glad you came to that conclusion yourself before we came and sought you out.
Sunday's a pretty good time for us.
That's awesome. You are always welcome. It's one of those once you're here, you're always family or slamily, like we like to call it.
Slamily, yeah.
Yeah. So questions. What questions do y'all have for Robyn? So many, I know. Where do we start?
Well, while they're thinking, I'm just going to be personal for a second and say, Robyn, my grandfather was John Clinton's band director in Ada, Oklahoma.
I knew this. I think I have a picture. There's a picture at the Clintons' house of John in his Ada drum major's uniform.
Yes, yes. Who's got a great question?
I have a question.
Sure, Tim.
Okay, Robyn, and you alluded to this, and I think the hardest thing in leadership is to tell somebody when they're off the tracks, when it's not working, and so I appreciate the fact that you laid out on a 1 to 10 relationship or 1 to 10 scale. Where are relationships for you, with 10 being the highest on the scale?
10, 10, 10, 10, 10. I
Yeah,
say, some people collect things and I collect people.
yeah. Isn't that probably why they ask you to be the executive director?
Could be, but I will. So I'm going to put a caveat on it though, Tim, which is it's 10 to a point, because if somebody is too disruptive to the culture,
Right?
if somebody cannot get their act together, if somebody, you have to weigh that personal relationship against what is happening for everybody else. And I actually have an example. I fired my mentor. I fired the person who was my high school faculty member from my Systema project.
Mm.
They were very disruptive to the organizational culture. A fine teacher, if they would have just gone in their room and shut the door and taught the children, but did not behave very well as a colleague to everyone else. And I probably was going to lose my entire strings team over it. So, um, and it was very difficult, and I lost the relationship. That person has not talked to me, picked up the phone, or answered an email from me since. This has been now almost 17 years.
Mhm.
It was still the right thing to do.
Yeah, and that's probably the exception rather
Yeah.
than yeah. Yeah, perfect. Absolutely. And again, the reason they hired you is because of the relationship you had with the organization, not because you had an MBA or didn't have an MBA, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
So Robyn, perhaps identifying that relationship building isn't a strength for everybody, what are some ways that you would encourage young teachers, middle career teachers, older teachers to help build relationships?
Mm. Um, so I like to eat. Eating together is very important. God knows this. I know where all the good food is in every city where we're going. I'm like, oh, here's where we're going. So I think eating is very important. It's kind of low barrier. Everybody has to do it, right? And so just in getting to know people and establishing relationships, even just like being an outsider to ACDA, um, I did a whole lot, even with my board and conference team leaders, people who were standing committee members, people who had performed at the last conference, several different things. I just called people and said, can we have Zoom coffee? Can we have Zoom coffee? And hey, all I want to know is I'm new here. And so how did you do your great thing? Why do you love ACDA? You know, what just not I just wanted to ask them to share with me about their experiences. And I scheduled just like half hour with people. And I gained a lot out of that. The other thing is being very, very present. So what I would tell new teachers is go to the building early if you can and grab a cup of coffee and stand and talk to the principal's secretary. Go make friends with the cafeteria manager because you will get an extra cinnamon roll. Stay late and be friends with the custodian who will bring you every spare pencil they find in the building because they're watching out for you. But some of it is in proximity. It doesn't mean you have to do it every day, but sometimes when you can catch just those 5 minutes alone where you can, you know, see somebody else is in the building early or working late, I think that there's camaraderie that's in that as well. And I know it's hard to believe, Paul, but I'm actually not an extrovert. I am an introvert. I've had an extroverted position for so long that I'm really good at pretending. But when we came off national conference, we are 3 weeks this week off national conference, and this is maybe the first week that I feel halfway back to myself. And I'm actually on an 8 week no travel. And part of that is just because I know it will take me that long to refill my cup again. So I think people appreciate leadership of all styles. When you're the executive, you end up being the spokesperson, so there's kind of a demand for extroversion there. But I don't think, if you smile at people and you say, "This is a great school. What do you like about it? This? How long have you been here?" People just like to talk about themselves. That's what
Okay,
I know.
let's use the custodian as an example, though, because you sound like you've had difficult conversations and you have high standards. What if you want to create that relationship, but your standards don't match the standards of the person you talk to, and you're trying to be authentic?
Oh. Well, I think it's different if you're new or if you're old. So, like, how the length of your relationship, because I think, first of all, if you're new and you're coming in and you're saying, my standards are this, there's an assumption that other people understand your standards, that's been articulated, that they know how to get there. My father-in-law was a pastor, and the church moved him around a lot as a church healer. So when churches were in trouble, they would move him in. But he said, I'm being brought here to bring change to these congregations, but I know that there's one thing that you don't touch, the Sunday school times. You do not change the Sunday school times as your first act of being a church leader. So, Paul, I think some of it is, how long has the custodian been there? How long? And sometimes what I have found is just doing the work together. So if you want your room done a very specific way, and I did. So when they would come to wax the floors, they have to shift all the instruments to one side and shift all the instruments to the other side and do all this kind of stuff. And I did not want anyone touching my instruments. Do not touch my instruments, right? So I just said to the custodian, will you tell me, and I will get some people up here and we will do the shift. This is going to make your job so much easier, right? Because I also did not like when he was moving things around my room, how he did it. But then he was just like, oh, I saw how you moved that. I can move that next time. So some of it was just in like demonstration. That's what I think, just being with people. But I think it's dependent upon how long you have had relationship, because nobody likes somebody coming into the place where they have been being like, you're doing it all wrong. I don't think that's you might think it, and let me be very clear. There are lots of things at ACDA that I still want to move. It's not the right time yet. It causes me, I call it cognitive dissonance, right? The distance between where you are and where you want to go. And I struggle here a lot about what is the capacity of the organization to move. Mine is mostly in speed. I don't feel like it's happening quick enough, right? But I maybe have made that mistake once before, so I am going to be more patient. Did I answer your question?
Thank you, Robyn. Hey, you call me, I'll come work for you any day.
Robyn, I have a question for you. Kind of building off of the idea of relationships, how organizational culture, especially in something like ACDA, the big picture culture. What are your thoughts on how you build that and how you are able to reach, a large organization, reaching a lot of people and that sort of thing, so that everybody knows what the goals are. Everybody, has that idea of where the culture is and we're rowing together.
Yeah, so I do think that this has been a challenge in ACDA because they have not acted, the organization has not acted in a unified manner. So states have done one thing, and depending on where you live, it's one thing, and then depending on where your region is one thing, and then depending on who's the leader, it's one thing, right? So to Maurice's point earlier, I just kind of rooted us back down into our purposes and said, regardless of where you live, how old you are, what is going on, how much money you have, any of these things, what is the foundational experience of ACDA? What is the cake? Everyone in this organization is getting cake. Then you put sprinkles on it, you put some other, right? So then you get the personalization, but we build from a floor, which everyone should be able to expect. Some of this has happened operationally, some of it has happened in consistent communications. Quite frankly, some of it has happened just at the board level, talking about what happens with disunity. So there are a couple of things that happen. The first thing that happens is that you get inequity. One of the defining characteristics of inequity is where you live defining your experience. So we actually have an equity value. So anything that is different across the country that is impacting how people are experiencing ACDA falls right there. The second thing is that when you are a region president or you're the national conference chair, this is not your wedding. This is not your prom. You are a steward. You are a steward of the vision of ACDA. And in fact, it's really important that what you are doing is building from what happened before, and then we're also passing that along to the person coming up the chain. So one of the ways, Scott, that we've built unity is onboarding leadership earlier. So we know I already know who the 2029 president is, Jessica Annapolis. She just got elected in February. The day after Jessica's election, I know, right? I know, Jessica's amazing. The day after Jessica's election, it was, and here's the national board schedule, and here's the meeting, right? And here, and here, and here. Now she won't have a vote for 4 years. It'll be 4 years before she has a vote. But her being on now is critical as we look at 2029 because we're still changing a lot of things in the organization. So we've done that at the national level, the region level, and we're getting ready to recommend that at the state level. The earlier onboarding, which will provide a consistency in vision there. So it's operational and it is in just articulating. For example, I'm super proud of this, you guys. This is the first time ever that there's been one region application. If you are applying as a performing choir for any of the regions, it is 6 applications because you have to apply in the region, but it's the same application. It's not 6 applications and it's not 6 rubrics because seriously, how many categories do you need to assess a performing choir? There are only so many, right? So this is the first time. So that's kind of where we are.
Brilliant. Just brilliant. And we could go on and on and on and on. Oh my goodness, Robyn, thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
inviting me. Thanks for welcoming me to the Slamily. I got to get the rest of the dates so I can put them on my calendar.
Absolutely. Well, we will not be together next Sunday, y'all. I know. I feel like it's been so like on and off, but the calendar has just been crazy this semester. Next Sunday we will take off for Easter, and then we will be back together the week after that with my dear friend Eddie Ursula. If you don't know Eddie, you're going to want to be here 2 weeks from tonight. Eddie is a PhD student in the Frost School of Music right now, but spent more than 20 years teaching in Miami-Dade County, all the things. If it has to do with music, he's taught it, but he is also one of the just like foremost speakers on not just teaching learners with special needs, but specifically learners with hearing loss, because he is a music educator who is without hearing and he'll share his story. I'm not even going to tell you. You've got to meet Eddie. He's really fantastic. I met Eddie with Tim as a Con Selmer VIP years ago, and just watching his career and what impact he's made on music educators around the globe has just been pretty awesome. So please join us in 2 weeks. And we've got an open mic before we're done. Hopefully everyone gets to hear from someone on the board in the next couple of weeks. We want to reach out to you and remind you this is an awesome time. If you have a student teacher, it is $10 to pay for their membership. What an amazing gift that you can give to a pre-service teacher right now before they graduate, before they finish their semester with you. $10. It's good for not just the rest of this year, but for a full calendar year from now, that they get to be a part of our Slamily. I mean, I think all of us would be able to take back some of the things we did in the first 2-3 years of our teaching if we had an opportunity to hang out with this group before we set foot into the classroom. So we'll be in touch. Hopefully you'll hear from us more, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Tim, what do you have for us tonight before we close up?
It's all been said. Robyn, super. Thank you for being with us. Thanks to everybody, and have a wonderful Easter.
Thanks, everyone. Make it a great week. Be well. Sign up for Craft and Culture